All right, so once again, everyone, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices, Hiring, Training, Working with, and Selling to Millennials. My name is Brian Munson. I am the Business Development and Sales Manager for NCBA CLUSA, and I will be today's webinar moderator. Your webinar today is co-hosted, of course, by NCBA CLUSA and Engage Consulting. Before we begin, just a quick bit of housekeeping for everyone that's on the line. Your phone line will be muted during this presentation to reduce background noise. You'll have a chance, of course, to pose a question, just not verbally. If you do have a question, you can type it into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Questions will be collected and answered as time allows at the end of the program, although if you do have a pressing question, Evan will do his best, of course, to answer that in real time. NCBA CLUSA is currently recording this program, so it will be archived on our website. You will receive an email containing a link to the posted recording, ideally tomorrow, if not later next week. So you'll be able to listen to it again, share it with colleagues, friends, whomever you might want to share this with that will think the content is good and valuable, as we do. So again, just to introduce Evan very quickly, he is the principal and founder of Ingage Consulting, headquartered in Woburn, Massachusetts. Engage operates under the core belief that the more engaged the co-op member is, the more loyal and successful the cooperative is then able to be. Evan has helped create and start over 10 separate companies, and he's gained that experience to be able to do that through 20 years at CCA Global, which is one of the largest purchasing co-ops in the country. At CCA, he led strategic planning and managed Carpet One, helping generate over $5 billion in revenues for the co-op. As a thought leader and speaker and author on leadership, Evan has deep roots with NCBA CLUSA. He served in 2015 as our keynote speaker at the National Purchasing Co-op Conference, and in 2016 he actually gave the presentation that you are about to hear in Miami on millennials, and we're very excited to bring it to you, members of co-ops. It was given initially to executive leadership, but we're happy and thrilled to share it with you. He's a great guy, very, very smart, full of useful ideas, and we hope that you enjoy the webinar today. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Evan, and we can get started. Evan?
Thank you very much, Brian. And let me start today by just telling you how thrilled I am to talk about this particular topic. It's kind of interesting. My sister and I have huge arguments over millennials. She hates them, and I don't mean like literally, but she hates having them in her employ. She gets frustrated. They tend to leave her. And I love millennials. And in fact, in my company, I have a tremendous number of millennials that are employed. I wanted to just take a second here and just talk a little bit about my background. When I was with CCA Global Partners, I started in 1990 the training department. And one of the things I've been very, very passionate about is training and understanding management. And I've been a student of management. I actually have an MBA. And I've probably written now 8 or 9 different articles on millennials. I've done a tremendous amount of research. And although a lot of people think of millennials as a very difficult group of people to manage, and in this particular case also we're going to talk about to sell to, I actually think they're the best. And this will come through in the presentation. But if I had one thought to leave all of you with, embrace millennials, and if you do a great job managing millennials, it's going to pay huge dividends for your business. So let's first off talk a little bit about what generations are and what do generations mean. Why do they have generations? And this is a slide showing a lot of different generations. And when you look at this slide, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Each generation is impacted by the things that happen while they are while they're a child. So if you're in the GI generation, and this is my parents, they suffered through the Great Depression, they suffered through World War II, and a lot of the things as a baby boomer myself I dealt with were direct results of how they looked at the world based on the Great Depression and World War II. And I remember as a child, and any of you on this call that are on the older side probably remember, eat all your food because they're starving people in China. And the idea that you would waste was, really considered, terrible. And of course, today we know that overeating is not a good thing. And different movements have happened, and the millennial generation has been impacted by a lot of things, but probably one of the biggest things is technology. And they were born with technology. I happen to have 2 millennial children, and I have one Generation Z, or it's called Generation Edge now. And they are so comfortable with technology that it is amazing. And another thing, and it's not on the slide, is one of the things that have happened in the millennial generation is the number of families that are no longer together. That, as a baby boomer, most people's parents sort of stuck together, and the amount of divorce was much less. Starting in Generation X and going into the millennial generation, the concept of having 2 parents that didn't live together has started to become very common, and I think that's had a huge impact on the different generations. Let's just have a little fun here. Brian's going to put up a little quiz just to see what generations you fall in, just to see what our group is made up of. So if you could just quickly click on which generation you're in so we can kind of get a feel for the group. And I guess we could have had people under 19. Okay. Brian, you're the person that can see, all I can see is it says poll in progress, so can we see the results? There we go. So no one in the silent. That really doesn't surprise me. We do have some millennials, a lot of baby boomers, a lot of people my age. That's great. So we've got a nice diverse group of people. Okay, Brian, if we can hide the poll, and we will continue on with the slides. So everybody values different things, and one of the things to just think about when I read through this slide is what is it that you value? Do you value becoming famous? Do you want to be a rock star, a movie star? Is free time something that is really important to you? Sorry about that. Owning a home, is that important to you? Being a good parent, living a very rich and religious life, having a high-paying career. And then interestingly enough, there's another one, not sure my control panel is covering, which I can't read. But we all have different values. What is the most important thing to you? So just take a moment here and think about yourself and which one of these are the most important to you. And then what I'd like to do is have Brian throw up one more poll, and this time I want you to think about millennials, and I want you to think about a high-paying career. Do you think it's the most important? Do you think it's the second most important, third most important, or fourth most important? So think right now of what you know of millennials. How do you think they view having a high-paying career? And Brian, when you're ready, feel free to share the results. How important is having a high-paying career for millennials? And then think for a moment while we're doing this, what do you think they value the most? What do you think they value the most? Okay, Brian, if you want to post things here. Okay, second, third, fourth. Well, you are all wrong. Brian, if you want to hide that. It was a trick question. It is the fifth most important thing. The fifth most important thing. The most important thing is being a good parent. And I think this has a lot to do with what I talked about, where there are a lot of households where there's been divorce in the family, and the importance of being a good parent is incredibly important to the millennial generation. Having a successful marriage, helping others, owning a home, have very religious life and having a high-paying career are equal. Lots of free time. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people, I think that having lots of free time would be very high, but it is not high with this group. And interestingly enough, being famous doesn't seem to matter much to them. Doesn't seem to matter much to them at all. When you look at the millennial generation in this slide, what it's showing you in the orange how this generation is going to be taking over in terms of its size and impact. So when you look at this, you can see that already the millennials are a big part of the generation, but only to get bigger. The other thing to remember is not only is there a shift in their size getting bigger, but as they get older and their roles become more mature within businesses, what you're going to see is that millennials are going to start to have more and more management roles, more and more leadership responsibilities, which is going to have a huge impact. So it's not just the increase in size of millennials in the workplace, but it's going to also be the impact of their impact within the business themselves. And then if you look at the bottom here, there's some really interesting things. 50% would rather have no job than a job they hate. And this is very interesting because I can tell you that my parents' generation was, I worked for a company, I worked for that company my entire life. I know my father did that, I know my father-in-law did that. You know, you build a pension, and you know, if there was something you didn't like at work, you just bit your lip and you lived through it. And that is what you were taught. It was in the culture, and I know a lot of you are in my age group, but you watch the TV shows of our youth, and this is what it was telling you, is, you know, you had a job, you always respected your job, and I love Bewitched, if you remember. You know, always Darren was worried about what his boss was going to say, or his boss was going to do. Millennials don't think that way at all. If they don't like their job, they're going to move on. I have a good friend of my son who I mentor, and he is on his third job in 18 months because he doesn't like the place. And every time, by the way, he moves, he steps up. 80% think they deserve more recognition than they get. This is a very big issue. But the interesting thing about this particular issue, and I'm going to talk more about this later, is the issue isn't that they are entitled, and that's what everyone thinks, that millennials are entitled, they always think they're doing a better job and they should be recognized more. The issue is that the older members of management, the boomers, the Gen Xers, are used to this idea of management where you don't give a lot of recognition, you don't give a lot of kudos. That people the feedback they tend to get is more about, hey, you need to do this, hey, you did this wrong, you should do it this way, and they're not giving people that attaboy, congratulations, recognition, because that's not how they were managed and that's not how they were taught. And in fact, in my book, Engaging Leadership, I talk a lot about the importance of feedback, and we're going to talk about that more too, that I believe that the issue with the baby boomers not feeling recognized is because the older generations simply don't recognize the way that they should. 75% are not completely satisfied with their job. That's why they change jobs quickly. You know, the idea that you work for one company for your life is just not in their lexicon. They don't think that way. They prefer recognition over higher pay. I can tell you with my friend that I was just talking about, and this is very, very fresh, he chose between two jobs, and one job he had a title that he really wanted, and the other job he didn't, and I would argue that the other job that he didn't take was the safer job and the one he would eventually make more money with, but he really wanted that title, and he wanted that title because he felt it would give him the recognition that he deserved, and he felt it would help him down the road in his future career. This statistic is 90% believe they deserve their dream job. And, you know, so you have a group of people that think so differently about work, where in my generation we were grateful to have work. In their generation, they look at work as something that they should enjoy, something they should be happy about, and something that they can do that is what they want to do. So what are the traits of millennials? I'm going to go through this very quickly. They're the most educated generation in Western history, probably all of history. And if you think about this, what they have done on the internet, how much they've learned in their childhood, not just in school, but in everything that they do is incredible. And they're entering the workforce more knowledgeable than any other employee. And if you think about also this, the amount of research that they're going to do on your company prior to taking a job with your company is amazing. My friend Curtis, my son's friend Curtis, you know, he went on LinkedIn. He read about the company. He read about the employees. He looked for people he knew those people. There was no LinkedIn when I was looking for work. They're very tech savvy. They're very comfortable with technology. They want to be with companies that utilize technology. They're civic oriented. They're conscientious. They're global citizens. They pay attention to the world. They're entrepreneurial. They're pragmatic idealists, and that's kind of an interesting thing. But they are idealists, but they believe that they can make their ideas and dreams come true. They tend to be more liberal. They're compassionate. They're progressive. They're diverse, practical, and results-oriented. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't give them credit for. They want to know how to win. And I'll repeat that. They want to know how to win. That's very important to this group. They're team-oriented. They're not overly religious, and they are multitaskers. And it's interesting because I've studied multitaskers, and there's a statistic out there like 69% of the population believes they're good at multitasking, and about 9% of the population actually is good at multitasking. The thing about millennials, and if you take the millennial group, and I will divide it now in half, and if you look at the younger millennials, they are actually good at multitasking because they've been multitasking from a very young age. The older millennials, before the smartphone and things of that nature, not as good. But when you look at the younger millennials, they're very good at multitasking. They are impatient and they are adventuresome. So, what do you think in terms of work is most important to millennials? And Brian, if you put up the quiz. This time, by the way, the actual answer is up there and available to you. Okay, Brian, are we about done? Okay. Flexible hours, training, free health care, I like that. And bonuses. Well, let's go and look at the answer. The number one most important thing to them is training and development. This is what they care the most about. Interestingly enough, and being in the training world and owning a training company and being at CCA for 20 years and running the training department, I can tell you most companies spend very little time on training. Very little time on training. But they want training, they want growth, they want to feel like they're learning, and that's very important. Followed by flexible work hours, followed by cash bonus and healthcare, which means our poll got it in exactly the right order. I'm going to talk more about these things, but the reality is that this group of people wants to learn and wants to grow, and they want to be in a position where they can learn and they can grow. Training millennials is a simple management best practice. I am an absolute strong believer in training, and in my company, I have about 15 people, and we have a budget for training And we give every single employee in the company, and by the way, about half of our company are millennials, everybody in the company has a budget of $2,000 that they can spend on any training that they want as long as it's business related. So if they want to go to a seminar, they want to take an online course, whatever they want to do to improve themselves in the business, they can do and they can choose. In addition to that, we're constantly looking and doing things to educate, sharing information, sharing articles. When we have monthly meetings, we're doing and combining training into this. Millennials want to grow. And I personally believe that each and every one of you should have, for every employee, a personal development plan. And we create one of those with our entire company. We review it quarterly, not annually. And by the way, we've gotten rid of the annual review in our company. And I'll talk more about this later, because once a year is not enough feedback for millennials. Millennials have a hard enough time staying at a job for a year, so the idea that you're going to give them feedback once a year is just simply not enough. But having a conversation about what can you do, to become better at what you're doing. Are they books? Are there people that they could learn from within the company? What is it that they need to do to become better? And having a plan for every person to improve is very important. And I want to point something out here. And this is sort of the aha moment for me, is that if you get good at training millennials, you are a good manager of anybody. And that's kind of the big aha. The old form of management, very top-down, very directive, not engaging, worked when the workplace and people accepted that as the norm. But when you look at millennials and realize that they need to be managed differently, and then you take those management practices and apply them to the other generations, they're good practices. It's a good practice to have a development plan for every employee, whether that employee is a baby boomer or Gen X, it doesn't matter. Everybody should have a training plan on how they can be better at what they do. Why matters, and this is a really big one, and by the way, I think this is the one thing that gives co-ops the biggest advantage. Millennials want to know why. 95% say they're motivated to work harder when they understand the importance of the particular task within the context of the company's bigger goals. They want to understand your vision. They want to understand what they do. As part of our review process, and I'm sharing these best practices with you, to take a concept and give you a tangible idea. The first question in our quarterly review process is, in your own words, what is the company vision? Why do we do what we do? And the second question is, how do you help the company achieve that? And we have this question because it's important that everybody understands how their role impacts the company and everyone sees and understands the big picture. Millennials want this. The more they see what they're doing is important, the more they're going to be happy, satisfied, and retained. And again, I believe this would be true for any generation. They're going to leave you. 91% of millennials expect to stay in their current job for 3 years or less. 45% of companies report higher turnover rates among this group versus other generations. While millennials are ambitious to move up in their career, they are loyal to companies. Loyalty to the company is not particularly a strong value. So again, in my generation, the idea of loyalty to where you work and you kind of sucked it up and you stayed there, very high. That's not true with millennials. Values matter. They have no problem leaving a job for one that they believe accommodates their personal values and ambitions. They hold it as a premium over job advancement in their current company. They want to work in a place that they feel matches their values. So I'm really sorry. No, I got it right. I apologize. So it's really important for you to share your mission and your vision of your company. If your co-op I assume most co-ops do have a mission and vision. If you're a member of a co-op business, share the mission and vision of your company. Let people know what your purpose is and why it matters what you do. That's really, really important. This is the point that I really wanted to make. Talk about being a cooperative. A cooperative is a very different business model, and whether or not your company is part of a cooperative or your company is a cooperative, the concept of being part of a cooperative appeals to millennials because they see it as a higher purpose, that they see the smaller businesses banding together and competing against larger businesses, and cooperatives are much more local, care much more about the local community, and really talking about being part of a cooperative. And I would say to you this, I wouldn't just talk about it after they start working. When you're interviewing them, I would mention that you're part of a co-op. I would talk to them what it means to be part of a co-op. Because if you want to get them to, if you want them to get inspired by working with you, and if they understand the cooperative nature of your business and how either you are a cooperative or you're part of a cooperative working together, this is something that will inspire millennials. This will attract them, and this will keep them in your business. So this is a huge advantage for cooperatives in the millennial generation, and you want to take advantage of it because this will help you attract the people that care about you. You know, there's some millennials that might not care about being part of a cooperative. You want the ones that do. So bring that up, and I think people with passion about what cooperatives do will stay there and work there longer and harder and be more committed than people that don't. Be transparent, and I think this is incredibly important. People need to know what's happening within the organization, within my own company, and understand two companies, Engage Consulting and Tortal Training. We involve every employee in the planning process of the company. We do a retreat, 2 days, we take everyone, we work together, we have a strategic plan, but we share the tactical plan every year, and everyone is part of it, so they're able to contribute. Does that mean it's a democracy? No. Does that mean every idea is used? No. But everyone has an opportunity to contribute, and everyone gets to see the plan. And then once a quarter, we give everyone an update as to where we're going, how the plan's working, and we share our financial information with every employee in the company. And we do this so that people see this company as being transparent, that we're not hiding, we're not lying. And what's interesting, because I've done a lot of reading on this and I've done a lot of talking to people on this, particularly people that I've worked with that have had troubled businesses, that every employee thinks that you're doing, the business is doing far better than it actually is. The concept of transparency is not just to share, but is to create a realistic understanding of what's happening in the business. Millennials want transparency. They want to know. It builds trust. It builds loyalty. Provide clear job descriptions. This is an area where I think most businesses fail. Having a job description that describes not only what they do in the job, but the attitudes that they're expected to do, the training that they're expected to either have done or to complete to be good at their job. Having great job descriptions are really important, and every employee should have them. Prior to being hired, they should be shared with the person you're hiring so that everyone understands. And one of the issues millennials have is they don't know what's expected of them. Going back to my sister argument, you know, she runs a small, very successful business. She doesn't have any job descriptions. And I go to her and go, people need clarity. And she says, well, I tell them. But I'll tell you something, it's nice to tell them, but when you share something in writing and they can see it and it's tangible, and by the way, we share everyone's job descriptions. Everyone gets to see everyone's job description in the company, so there's no secrets. There's total transparency. Define what it takes to get promoted. And I want to say this because I think this is really important. Not everyone wants to be promoted. And some people are very happy doing what they're doing. Very rarely will someone have that conversation, but that's part of a good quarterly review program, is to sit back and say to people, what and how do you see your future with the company? And then they say, you know what, I really like what I'm doing now. I want to become better at it. That's great. That's fine. But if they want to be promoted, you need to let them know what it would take and what they would have to do and how long they would expect it to take. Because when you don't define it, the millennial is going to assume that it's going to happen faster than it's actually going to happen. So they're going to get disillusioned. They're not going to feel recognized because they're not getting promoted because they didn't know what it took to get promoted. So it's really important to talk about that. Embrace technology. I think this is really important, and I could talk a lot about this. In my company, we use a product called Zoom, and Zoom is a video conferencing product that's incredibly easy to use, and it allows us all, even though everyone in the company works basically remotely, to have meetings, see people, talk to people. It's a great piece of technology. We used to use a product called Slack, which is a terrific internal communication tool. We replaced Slack with a product that has basically Slack built into it, and it's part of a bigger CRM production tool. But a product like Slack is something I think I would recommend all of you look at as a way to communicate in teams better. But look at technology and how you all work, because millennials love technology, they love to use technology, and technology can make you far more effective. Be open to flex hours and working from home. It was interesting to me that we did start this company with an office and putting people in the office, and then people started to say, well, gee, it's a long commute. Can I work 1 day from home? Can I work 2 days from home? And then eventually we basically said, you know what? Everyone can work from home. Saved the company a tremendous amount of money, and with Zoom, it gave us the ability to have the good communication. And when people have errands, and we have employees, and I know from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock that one of my employees, one of the most valuable employees in the company, is going to pick up their kids at school. I know that. But I also know that from 5 o'clock to 6:30 or 7, she's working, she's available. And we give people flexibility, and we focus on people getting the jobs done. Obviously, people that are working hourly have to track their hours, and that's common sense. But we're flexible. Now, if you're running a business that has a door and open hours and that customers come in, obviously you can't have everyone working from home. That'd be crazy. But be open to working to flex hours and working from home. This is a high perk, and people looking to leave that are going to leave being able to work at home to have to go to an office, you're going to be keeping those employees because they love working from home. But I'll tell you something about myself personally. The reason why I didn't want to work from home personally was I was concerned about the lack of intimacy or being with others. And with Zoom, I'm with others all the time. It's anytime I want, I'm having a video conference with any of my staff. I video conference, by the way, with 90% of my clients, and it's really a tremendous. By the way, I'm plugging the product. I get no money for it, but Zoom.us. If you don't use it, try it. It's an unbelievable product. Training. Millennials want to be trained. Anything, I'm in, obviously more in the purchasing cooperative side of the cooperative world, but sending people to the purchasing cooperative conference so they can intermingle and network with other people, huge. Any kind of training that they can have to improve their job. I talked about having that personal development plan that's reviewed every quarter. Very important. Okay, everything I've told you up till now, basic, simple, common sense. Very basic, simple, common sense. Probably a lot of you could say, I kind of knew that. I kind of knew that. Now I want to bring you to a more advanced method of working with millennials and with management, period. And this is important. I call it reversing the process. So you're working with a millennial, you're working with anybody. It's easy to create a to-do list and say, hey, here's a to-do list, go ahead, go do it. I remember when I first worked at CCA Global Partners, I would sit down and, I would talk with my manager, who's one of the greatest people on earth, and he would give me a to-do list. And I would do my best to do the to-do list. Well, the best practice when working with millennials is to have them build the to-do list. Because when they build the to-do list, they're taking ownership of the to-do list, and they're much more likely to complete it. So what you do with millennials is you say, look, let's make a list of all the things you're working on. Would you please do that? Then they bring you the list, you review and go, yep, you're right here, you're right here, right here. Oh, by the way, I think you missed this. Do you think this should be included? Oh, yeah, you're right. I did miss that. You add it to the list. But 90% of the list came from them, and it's their list, and they're empowered, and they want to complete their list. When someone hands you a list, it's the manager's list, it's the manager's responsibility. You go, I don't want to do that, and you're much more effective. You reverse the process, and you have them create their own list of things that they're working on. Do weekly one-on-one. So I talked about the quarterly review process where you get together and you talk about the big picture goals, and you talk about how they're doing in the company, and you work on their development plan and those things. But having a quick weekly one-on-one meeting, it's a scheduled time when you get together, but you reverse the process. So the way I was taught to do a one-on-one meeting is I would get together with the person I was managing. I would pull out my to-do list. Okay, this is a bad looking to-do list, but anyhow. And I would go, okay, Jane, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Why didn't you do that? And I would go through that to-do list with them, and it was like they were going to an inquisition. Now, I was nice about it, but that's sort of how weekly one-on-ones work is, you told me you were going to do this, so I want to know what you did, and you go through. Reverse the process. So how do you reverse the process? Is you come into the meeting and you go, Jane, would you tell me how your week was? That's great. How are you doing on the things you're working on? What things have you had success? What things have been tough? And they tell you. And then you end with, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? And this way, they're presenting to you. You're not the inquisitioner, going through the list, making them feel bad. They're, and you don't go to them and say, well, what have you accomplished? What haven't you accomplished? What have you got done that's working really well? What have you got done that's not working well? What are you doing? What's gone well for you this week? What hasn't gone well for you this week? This opens up and allows them to tell you when they haven't been able to complete stuff. And we all know from our own lives that we rarely are able to complete everything we think we're going to complete. That's just reality. Things happen. And when you allow them to report to you, they're taking ownership of the process. They're not feeling like they're being penalized. They're seeing you as a mentor or coach, and that's really important, as opposed to a person that's there to check up on them. You're there to help them. You're reversing the process, and that's really important. Be a coach mentor. And I think that this is really important. I'm going to share a real life example. I had an opportunity to report to two people. And I loved and respected both of them very, very much. One person I would go to and say, hey, I have a problem, and that person would say, well, tell me about the problem. And I would tell them about the problem. And then they would ask me some more questions, and they'd say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I go, oh, I didn't think that's good. Those are good ideas. And then they would end up and say, I'm sure you'll make a good decision. Whatever you do, I'm with you. I love talking to that person. The other person, I would go and say, I have a problem. I'd like to get your advice. And they say, what's the problem? And I tell them the problem, and they say, okay, go do this, 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 and this. Did I want to ask that person for help? Nope. Because I was being told what to do. The other person was coaching me and mentoring me. And I felt very comfortable going to them with problems because I knew that they weren't going to take the decision from me, they were going to help me. A good manager is someone who is approachable. You want your staff not to be afraid of you. You want your staff to feel you're approachable and you're there to help. If you're constantly correcting them, changing things, making decisions for them, they're not going to be happy. And millennials are looking for the coaching and they're looking for the mentoring. And most managers are directive and they're not consultative. And again, this is sort of part of the idea of being an engaging manager, is where you're listening and you're helping. And it's really important. I think this is a great practice for everyone, not just millennials. But this is what millennials are looking for. Okay, let's take a few moments here and talk about selling millennials. I'm going to do this pretty quickly just so we're able to have Q&A at the end here. You know what, I think I hit the wrong button. There you go. When you're selling millennials, share your mission and vision. Let customers, when they go to the website, see what you're about. In your place of work, if customers are coming in, you should have signage and talk about what you're doing as a company so that they can see your why and hopefully share that vision with you. Talk about being a cooperative. Millennial customers like buying from cooperatives. They like supporting smaller businesses. And this is an important part of the selling process, is don't be shy about being a cooperative. I remember when I first started in the business, the person I reported to said essentially, never mention the word cooperative to any customer ever, because they don't know what it means. It confuses them. And that person today, I would say, is probably the hugest and biggest advocate of mentioning your cooperative of any person in the country. And that's because he realizes that the world has changed, the generations have changed, values have changed, and people really value cooperatives today, and it should be mentioned. Being transparent about what your policies are, what you do, that people aren't surprised. Millennials don't like it when, there's this little extra bill, there's this, we didn't tell you about this or we didn't tell you about that. You want to be very clear and very transparent about your company and the services you offer. You want to embrace technology. They're expecting you to have a Facebook page. They're expecting you to have an Instagram page. They're expecting you to tweet. They're expecting, and this is important, that when they go on their Facebook page and they write a message, that you're going to respond to that message. And in fact, I don't know how many of you know about Facebook, but you can actually look and they'll tell you the average response time of a company. So, they expect that you're paying attention to your Facebook page and you're asking questions. I can tell you I go on companies' Facebook pages all the time and ask them questions. It's very empowering. So you need to look at technology and how you operate as a company. And every one of you are part of different kinds of co-ops, but this is an excellent example of how co-ops can work when they work together on finding and accessing technology that can be shared within the whole co-op environment. Leverage influencers. There are certain people that are in the millennial generation, within friends groups, within communities, that are influencers that people pay attention to. And if you find people like that and they blog about you, they write a nice post about you on Yelp, or they put something on your Facebook page, that means a lot. And a really good practice in today's world with millennials is to ask people if they've had a good experience, hey, would you mind writing a Yelp review? Would you mind writing a nice note on Facebook? They get social media. They don't mind doing that. And it's very, very important. And I know it's kind of hard to understand who's an influencer or not an influencer, so I say take no chances. Ask everyone for help, because millennials will do this. Now, everything I've talked to you about before, I've said, hey, this works for every generation. In selling, millennials may be a little different. You know, if you ask someone of my age, hey, would you mind going and posting on Yelp for me? Well, I'm going to go, Yelp, I don't know how to do that. And that may be not a good use of your time. But if you're talking to someone in their 20s, you know, doing that makes sense. I mean, I've been to a lot of restaurants where the waiter will give me a card and said, if you enjoyed the service, please go on Yelp and please mention me. Provide large amounts of information they want to read. Your website should be content full, where they can go in and learn about your products, learn about your services, learn about what you're doing. That if there are other websites that you really like that have great information, you should have a section of, hey, here are key links to learn more. Millennials like to go online and they like to learn. I don't have a slide on this, but they also do a lot of it on the phone. And today, I believe more internet surfing is done on the phone than is done actually on the computer. So your website should be mobile friendly. My conclusion, and we can now go to opening up for Q&A. My conclusion is very simple. Embrace millennials. Millennials are an outstanding part of our community, and that if you work with millennials, they will be your best employees. So I am going to open this up for questions now.
Thanks for that, Evan. That was awesome. I think you know, I wasn't able to see the presentation in Miami last year, and I can see why it was so so well received. And you know, from my point of view, I appreciate, you know, the engagement opportunities through the polls and a few of the other things that you did. So thank you for that. We do have one question up so far, and it's about the role of the economic and labor context, you know, for millennials. Unions, they've diminished, the person is saying, and you can't go to work for a single company and get benefits and a pension anymore. And it seems that most young people are forced to piece together work and meet their extreme student and healthcare debt. So it sounds like it's a little bit of a comment on, you know, millennials sticking around and kind of job hopping. But I think maybe she's looking for some information on the economic and labor context of those two things.
You know, this is an excellent question, and you know, really progressive companies are doing a lot about this. So there is a yogurt company called Orange Leaf, and they have a lot of people that are, you know, that working in high school or summer jobs. And they made a decision that they were going to educate their employees on life. So they have a university, the Orange Leaf University, where they teach them on how to be good employees. And then they have a whole section on how to write resumes, how to get mortgages, all kinds of different life functions. And as part of the benefit of working for them, they get the employees get knowledge to help them be more successful in life. And what they have found is that the average length of time that these part-time workers work for them has increased dramatically. They come back year after year. They feel a sense of loyalty. They don't have any expectations that when someone graduates college they're going to go and serve yogurt forever, but they just want to make that experience for those employees while they're there good. So instead of getting one season out of them, might get 3 or 4 seasons out of them. And they recognize that those employees that have been there for multiple seasons are much better, much more effective employees. In my own company, Tortal Training, as part of our e-learning thing, we actually have 65 life courses that we have developed on every aspect of savings and understanding different investments, buying houses, even understanding things about the internet. And I think that to answer your question, I want to answer two things here. One, I'm incredibly pro-union. I look at unions almost like they're cooperatives. I think it's sad that unions don't exist in the way they did before. I don't think we on this call can fix that. But I think we owe it to ourselves to educate our employees on the importance of planning and saving. I personally, when we bring on a new employee, I talk to them about the importance of participating in our 401k program. And we have a very substantial company match. Because today is different, and you have to take that responsibility to save for your future. And I think companies that recognize and do that are going to do far better. And I'll share this too, and I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think it's an important answer. We as a small company have a very difficult time offering good benefits. And we have a difficult time doing this because everyone wants to charge us more, the technology to provide it, and bigger companies are able to offer disability insurance, long and short, life insurance, all kinds of different options that I as a small company can't do. So I went to an outsourced company called TriNet, which I'm not a huge fan of, but there are a lot of them out there. And basically I outsourced my entire benefits and payroll. And what this allows me to do is save money on healthcare. We saved 30% the first year, which, by the way, more than paid for the fee that we paid for the services. But it also allowed us to offer 401k plans with lots of options and with much lower overhead costs. And one of the things about 401k plans is when you're small, you get hit with these high administrative fees. And then we could offer people disability, life insurance. They could buy additional life insurance. So a small company can offer big company benefits if you do look for these PEOs, professional employment organizations, that in essence, they're not a true cooperative, they're more like a buying group, but where they're taking small businesses and combining them so that you can offer benefits like bigger companies. And I would strongly suggest doing that. One of the slides at the end, it says that they would prefer better benefits over better pay, and I think that benefits are very important in terms of keeping people and for society later in life that people are prepared.
Great.
Sorry about
Thanks.
being a little long-winded there, but it was a great question. I'm very passionate about it.
No problem. So we've got two more that have come in. More about sort of a work process here. It says millennials seem to want to work with headphones in their ears, which I believe causes more errors. Do you have any data about that?
I have no data about that at all. I'm making the assumption that they're referring to not like a headset for a phone, but they're referring to music. And I would say that everything depends on what they're doing. I wouldn't want for most of my employees to be listening to music because I want them, I don't know, I haven't given this a lot of thought, and I have no doubt.
As an older millennial, I can comment on this question. Myself and several of my younger millennial colleagues generally will work with headphones in. And for me, like I'm not listening to the radio or songs with lyrics because that is distracting. So I'll just put on music, instrumental music that loops. That's pretty repetitive. That helps me power through work or whatever tasks that I happen to be doing. Others, they can kind of tune out and filter the words away, and they just want sort of that noise in the background. But I would agree that it really does depend on what you're doing. If it's something that involves critical thinking, I'm not sure. I think, like you said, Evan, it's really about communicating with them and trying to understand, okay, why do you need to have music on? And if you do, tell me about how this benefits your work process. From my perspective, that's what I can offer.
It's funny you say that, Brian. because I always make the argument I'm most productive on an airplane. And when I'm on an airplane, I'm listening to music because I have a headset on because I don't want to hear the noise of the plane. And I'm listening to music and I'm powering through emails, I'm writing documents. Never really looked at it that way. But certainly, you know, if you're running a retail shop and someone's got the headset on listening to music, they can't even hear the door open. So it would probably depend on the role.
Right. Next question here. You know, the training is expensive, so how do you invest in the training that millennials want when, you know, they're only going to be there, you know, per the data, 3 years or less? The ramp-up time for an employee to be ready to go out to sell office supplies, in this instance, is pretty lengthy, so not having them stick around is expensive.
You know, there's an adage in the training world is, you know, what if I train them and they leave? And then the comeback is, what if you don't train them and they stay? The point of training is how do you break that 3-year period? How do you transform that time? And the point that I would make on training is that if you train them, they're going to stay much longer. And that instead of an average of 3 years, you might get an average of 8, 9, or 10 years. And that's going to have huge dividends to your company, as well as the impact of training. And I could go on this topic forever, but the reality is that there's probably no singular investment you can make in your business than training people. If you're in the stationery business, if they are friendlier and nicer on the phone, people are more likely to call back. If they know how to add on to orders, you're going to increase your order sale. They're going to close more customers, and all of these things have huge, huge economic returns. And what I find very interesting is large corporations invest a tremendous amount in training, and small companies don't. And the reason I think most small companies don't is that it's difficult for them to find the time to train. So in our co-op at Carpet One, one of the biggest issues we had was that owners, when they hired new salespeople, always looked for someone who had sold flooring before, because they didn't have time to train them on how to sell flooring or on the product. We, as a co-op, got together and built training on product and selling skills. And when we first did this, it was on videotape. And essentially, we went to the owners of the members and said, look, don't hire people with bad habits. Hire people with a great aptitude for selling, and we can give you the tools to train them on product and to train them on selling skills. And when we did that, the economics were unbelievable because we increased the average amount a salesperson sold by about 30 or 40%. We improved gross margins by about 4 or 5%. We had it's all part of the increased sales. We had a big shift in selling better goods instead of selling on price. So, you know, what I would say to people in a co-op is that one of the greatest things you can do as a co-op is invest in producing and creating training materials that your members can use so that the cost of training is reasonable and inexpensive as opposed to a small business doing it, where really in a small business there can be, you know, there's certainly things you can go on to. You know, there's lynda.com, there's Open Sesame, where they have things, you know, training courses that are reasonably priced that you can offer to people, but none of it's customized for your business. But the co-op itself can create training that across the entire co-op is incredibly economical. It can be really more on target. Hopefully, I answered that.
Yeah, and one of the things, Evan, you know, to sort of tack on to this question that we talked about at the conference last year in one of the workshops that we did was Sphere 1 was talking about, you know, because people were, the co-op question is, you know, how do we increase our purchasing volumes? You know, how do we help our members purchase more through the co-op and, you know, keep that cycle going? And one of the answers was training, and they experienced a jump in sales both for what people were buying through the co-op, but also what the members of the co-op were selling by, improving product knowledge. And if the person wanted to email myself directly, I can kind of put you in touch with that group if you'd like, and you can kind of see how they did it. But that's at this time, that's all the time we have. So I want to thank you, Evan,
Brian,
again.
if I could just add one last thing on what you just said in the
Sure.
30 seconds you have left. People that work for you need to understand you're part of a co-op, and they need to understand the importance of supporting co-op vendors and what those vendors do for you. A lot of times the employees within a co-op don't even know the difference between vendors that are co-op vendors and those that are not. And the co-op vendors are doing so much to help and support your business that they need to understand that, and that by doing that alone will improve purchasing through the co-op. Thank you all.
Yep, and I want to thank Evan again for leading us today, for preparing this session. We've recorded it, so we'll be able to share it ideally tomorrow, if not within the next few days. If you're looking for more information about purchasing co-ops, if you're a member of a purchasing co-op and you'd like to get your purchasing co-op involved, please have them email me, or you can email me. Again, my name is Brian Munson. My email address is bmunson, M-U-N-S-O-N, at ncba.coop. I encourage you to visit ncba.coop to subscribe to our e-newsletter, Co-op Weekly, and you can also get some more information on the upcoming Purchasing Co-op Conference here in DC, October 4th through the 6th, later this year. So again, thanks again to Evan. It's been my pleasure to moderate today's webinar. Thank you everybody for joining today. Have a great day. Evan, we'll catch up offline. Sound good?
Sounds good. Take care,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.